Welcome to the Loud Whisper Reignite Your Voice podcast. This is your healing space, providing you with hope and inspiration as you become more connected to yourself. Your safe vessel, helping you move to a higher consciousness to reignite your voice and discover who you are destined to be really inside you. I am Isabel Drawn, your host. I am also an author, entrepreneur, and a life transformation and spiritual coach. Most importantly, I am a perpetual student of life, just like you. So let's explore together. Claim what is already inside you. Welcome to the Loud Whisper Reignite Your Voice podcast. This is your healing space, and I am your host, Isabel Drawn. Thank you so much for joining us today. I say this all the time. You could be listening to any podcast, but you have decided to be with us here at the Loud Whisper podcast, your healing space. It is the healing space. Please subscribe. Please share with your family and friends. The more people we have in the community where we talk about everything humanity, everything healing, the better the world becomes. So again, thank you so much for being here. Today is a solo episode. Absolutely. Yes, it's a solo episode. I love solo episodes to be able to share with you guys what's on my mind, what I'm thinking and feeling. And I do get DMs. Sometimes you guys are like, when are you bringing this solo episode? So I am here today and I'm excited to talk about this topic. I've talked a little bit about it before, but I think it's very important, especially with the work that I'm doing with myself and my clients and where the world is right now. My mic is giving me a headache. And where the world is right now, I believe that this is very important for us, for me at least, to continue having this conversation and for the world to have this conversation. And this conversation is about your identity. As I'm doing my work and work with my clients, as I mentioned earlier, I'm starting to realize how powerful of a role identity has in the way we live our lives, in how we show up for ourselves, in what we do for ourselves, even in how we feel about ourselves. Identity has a huge role to play. And then also, too, a lot of us are still living our inherited identity. You're probably thinking to yourself, okay, she said inherited identity. We're crying out loud, what is inherited identity? So for me, the way I would define inherited identity is this. Inherited identity is identity that you have acquired from your family, from your friends, from your environment, from your school, to any space or place that you have lived long enough. You know, you've heard this before, and if you've never heard this before, you are a product of your environment. And that's where our inherited identity comes in. But today I want to go a little bit deeper. This type of inherited identity that I want to speak to you about is the one that each and every one of us inherit from childhood. So depending on where you're from, what part of the world you're from, what country, even with the country, you have different cultures. Like in my country, we have different tribes. So each tribe has got its own its own identity, the way they do things, the way they move. So each and every one of us have an inherited identity. And it's not a bad thing. It's such a beautiful thing. The reason why I say that is the best parts of me come from my inherited identity, my African culture. The best part of me as a woman come from my inherited identity. But there's some parts, some habits, some characteristics about who I am, who I was becoming, what I inherited that I had to let go. You know why? Because it was no longer serving the person that I needed to become to do God's purpose on this earth. I came to that realization, some of the things that I had learned growing up from my wonderful family, from my wonderful community, right? From the spaces that I had grown up in. Those traits, patterns, habits,
correct, characteristics. All of those, all those were inherited. Yeah. The ones that I had to let go. So I had to let them go. And the reason why I had to let them go, because they were keeping me stuck. I did not know this. It was embedded in me. Embedded. This identity was embedded. It's just who I was. I'm telling people this is all I know, and this is who I was. But something had to change. And that's why I want to talk to you about inherited identity. So maybe this will be able to help you in your own journey. Sometimes we ask ourselves, why am I stuck? You don't realize it's because you're still living an identity that you didn't choose, and a story that you never wrote, a story that you don't write, that you don't edit, you don't do none of that. You're just living according to what you have always been told who you are and what you should be in this world. So let me ask you this. What if the reason you feel disconnected from yourself isn't because you're broken, but because you're living from an identity you inherited instead of one you intentionally chose? I want to ask that again. What if the reason you feel disconnected from yourself isn't because you're broken, but because you're living from an identity you inherited instead of one you intentionally chose? And what if some of the very things that helped you survive are now the very things keeping you from becoming who you are meant to be? That part, this second one here, I was writing notes about this a lot. This had a lot to do with my survival. And I had to let some of those things go. Because my survival, like most people, helped me survive. It protected me, it guided me, shielded me in times and spaces where I didn't know what to do, what to think, and what to feel. What comes in like an animal is the survival instinct. But then we all have that instinct. But I want us to start checking, what instinct are we living off of? Is it the survival one, or is it the intentional one, the whisper one, right? We have to look into that. What instinct are we living on? So I know some of you are like, I think I already talked about it. What is the cause of inherited identity? Inherited identity can come from family expectations, culture, religion, survival patterns, generational trauma, gender roles, and achievement-based work. Yes, the achievement-based work, that's just as big as all the other categories of the trauma, the expectations, the culture, and the religion. And I want you to understand this. Rather, I want to offer you to understand this. In, excuse me, inherited identity isn't bad at all. It's not a bad thing to have inherited identity. I have said this over and over again when I talk about this inherited identity. The best part of me as a human being came from my African culture. The best part of me as a woman came from my African culture. So that's why it's important for me to emphasize that inherited identity is not a bad thing, because it always, if not often, was created from love, from protection, and from survival, right? So the identity that you have, the things that your family, your culture, your environment were telling you to be or who you to become, they were doing this because of love, because of protection, okay, and survival. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. So we're not looking into the inherited identity to pick it apart as to why it's so bad and why it's done this to us and why it's not good, it's not serving. I don't want us to do that. I want us to be able to differentiate. I want us to become so aware with ourselves that when we start showing up in spaces, acting a certain way, and you're not feeling right within yourself, you start to understand. Or even when you're starting to pursue something in your life and it doesn't feel right with yourself, you're aware enough to say, oh, this is something I grew up thinking, this is something I was told I needed to do. But guess what? This no longer serves me in the life that I'm living. So that's what we're talking about. So inherited identity is not the enemy. It's far from the enemy. In many ways, it has protected a lot of us, if not all of us. Question here, the question here is, Whether I'm sorry, the question here isn't whether your identity was wrong. The question is it still serving the person you're becoming? So the question isn't whether inherited identity is wrong. It is it still serving the person you're becoming? Are you still living from an identity that served who you were or the one that serves who you're becoming? Are you living in an identity that served who you were or the one that serves who you are becoming? We all evolve, we all grow, but there are some things about us with humanity we hold on to when it comes to our identity. And we don't realize that it becomes our personality, that's our personality, and that is our character, and that's how we're showing up in life. And some of these identities that we grew up with, they're not serving us in the journey that we're going. In fact, they're pulling us back, keeping us stuck, make us not feel worthy, and wondering why things are not moving because deep down we have it embedded. There's certain things, certain patterns, certain habits that we have culturally adapted, and we have that embedded to the point where when you want to pivot, when you want to do something different, you start questioning yourself. I don't think it's right. It's not that you're questioning yourself. You are worried about the people in your environment, in your culture, in your family, in your friend group, in your community, what they're going to say if you come to the realization by saying, this person that I grew up as, some of these habits, some of these traits, some of these characters that I gained, that I acquired, that I was taught, that I intentionally did not choose growing up, they're no longer going to serve the person that I'm becoming and the direction that God has for my life. Okay. And just because something was handed to you doesn't mean you're required to carry it forever. Just because something has been done in your family generation after generation after generation after generation, that doesn't mean you have to do it forever. Because some things, I know you've heard this before, break the curse. It's been going on generation. Sometimes when you're breaking the curse, it's not only because the thing is really bad, but it's because the thing is not serving the family. It's not serving the community. It's not serving people to move forward. While it worked 8 decades ago, while it worked 3 decades ago, while it worked 2 decades ago, that may not work now. We have to understand, just like nature evolves, I always say everything that God created evolves, everything that God created changes, everything that God created does transformation, it has evolution. We too have to evolve. We cannot continue showing up as the same people with the same habits, traits, and patterns that we had, that we were taught growing up. Something about us has to change. Something about us has to um, really adjust. It has to pivot. The reason why it's important for some of us to pivot, the reason why it's important for some of us to honestly look into this inherited identity is because what it's done. Remember when I talked about how it keeps us stuck? Remember when I talked about how it may be preventing you from becoming your best self? It may be preventing you from really pushing forward and being who you're supposed to be. It may even prevent you from healing. It may even prevent you from finding love, being in love, or being the best self. There's so can go on and on and on and on and on. We all know what life looks like. We all know how things keep us stuck. We all know how things prevent us. This is what happens to most of us who keep carrying on this inherited identity. So this is what happens. I'm going to go a little bit deeper here. This is what happens with inherited identity. We do not take time to self-reflect and to look at ourselves and see this inherited identity, this identity that I inherited. Okay. One that I never chose. One that everybody said I need to show up this way, act this way, be this person. Okay. There is something about this identity that while it's so powerful and it's given me the best versions of myself, the things about this inherited identity that I learned from family, from culture, from spaces that I grew up in, that can no longer serve the person that God intends for me to be. Because this inherited identity, okay, this is what it did to some of us. This is what an inherited identity did to some of us. Remember, I said inherited identity is not a bad thing, but you have to start questioning yourself at different points in your life. The person that I was a few years ago, am I still able to sustain myself to keep moving into a certain direction? Are the patterns and the habits that I inherited still going to allow me to move forward? Because I want you to understand I want you to understand some of the things that that living in an inherited identity has done to people. Some of us inherited silence. Some of us inherited self-sacrifice. Some of us inherited the belief that our worth is found in what we do. Some of us inherited strength and not softness. Some of us inherited the belief that being a good person means abandoning ourselves. Your inherited identity may have gotten you here, but it may not be the identity that carries you into your purpose. There are versions of you that were necessary for survival, but they will never, and I mean never, meant to become your permanent residence. God may honor your journey, but He will not ask you to stay in an identity you have outgrown. So, what if your next level doesn't require doing more? What if it requires becoming, knowing, understanding, and even going home to yourself and finding your truth and living in your truth and really writing your story with this identity that you're trying to discover for yourself? Yeah. You're probably saying, how do I do that? Okay. I understand that now I am living an inherited identity itself. How do I move forward from here? The solution to this is for you to start becoming aware. Self-awareness is crucial. Self-awareness is the number one starting point. It's the starting point, okay, for healing. Become aware about it. Don't be ashamed. There is nothing wrong with asking yourself difficult questions. So ask yourself those difficult questions. Discover truth from yourself, and it'll require with you asking those difficult questions. Release what no longer serves you. You and I both know that we know deep down in our soul what no longer serves us. But sometimes, you and I are holding on to these things, people, things, places that are no longer serving us. We're holding on to them because you know what? We are afraid to let them go because of what people say. We're afraid to let them go because we feel like we're abandoning everybody else. We're afraid to let them go because we feel like we won't belong. It's part of your belonging. You are afraid to let those things go that no longer serve you. Release what's not serving you, no matter how hard it is. Life is about learning and unlearning. Okay. As we learn life, we also have to unlearn. Relearn to self-trust yourself. Relearn to self-trust. A lot of us, especially women, we don't know how to trust ourselves. We don't even know how to begin to trust ourselves because from the time we were little girls, we have been conditioned to think and feel a certain way, to show up a certain way, to look a certain way, to perform a certain way, to behave a certain way. So a lot of us do not have trust with ourselves. You have to learn to trust yourself. Return to your authentic self. And how do you do that? Listen to that still voice inside of you. That whisper, that is your truth. That is the way. That is the light. You know how people say Jesus is the way, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the light. That little whisper, that's it. For me, I say that's where God speaks the loudest. You will hear me say this in every podcast. In every podcast, return to your authentic self. Relearn to self-trust. That means tuning into yourself. That means you not ignoring what you call the intuition, which is that whisper that you hear that tells you, baby girl, say no. And you keep saying yes because you're afraid to disappoint someone. Baby girl, these patterns that you were doing, they're not going to serve you where you're going. Where you're going, God cannot have you go with these patterns, these habits. Yes, you got them from your environment. Yes, you got them from your family. Yes, you got this identity right from your culture. But where you're going, this is not going to serve you. I'll give you a perfect example. Grow up in a culture where women were told, we were told, don't speak too much. A woman is supposed to be quiet. You know why? They would say, who wants to marry a woman who talks too much? That was the excuse. Who wants to marry a woman who talks too much? So a lot of women in my culture, we didn't talk. You kept quiet. When there are people around, you say nothing. When there are all men around, as a woman, you're not supposed to speak. So guess what? It becomes our identity. We show up in grade school that way. We show up in middle school that way. We show up in high school that way. We show up in college that way. We show up in our friendships that way. We show up in our marriages that way. We don't speak because we were taught, we were conditioned. We inherited that identity that said, girls don't talk too much. You're supposed to keep quiet. But guess what? Imagine if I continued to carry that. I speak for a living. That's what I do. I speak for a living. But guess what I had to do? I had to unlearn that. I had to decondition myself from that. I had to sometimes when I'm speaking, am I supposed to be here? Am I really supposed to be here? Is this not supposed to be speaking? These are conversations, honestly, that I was having with myself. You know why? Because I didn't intentionally use this. It is a conditioning within me, in my brain. My whole system used to be like, you're not supposed to be talking too much. You're a girl. People don't like people who talk too much. So keep quiet. So I had to unlearn that. I had to come to the realization that while the best parts of me, and I mean the best parts of me, came from my African culture, the best part of me as a woman came from an African culture. But there are some parts of my identity that I picked up from either my family, from either my culture, my environment, my relationships, my communities. Those patterns, characteristics, habits that have created my identity, they're not going to serve me where God is taking me. I can't be quiet and silent where what God needs me to do. I can't. It's not going to work because God requires me to talk to people. God requires me to show up and be with people. God requires me. The work that God put me on this earth requires me to speak. It requires me to amplify not only other people's voices, but my voice too. So I had to decondition myself from that inherited identity that I grew up in from my culture, where it says girls are not supposed to talk too much because who wants to marry a girl that talks too much? And now that I say that, it goes to tell me, and this is way off topic, but I need to jump into there really quick. I always ask this question, and for you, my audience, I want you to ask yourself this question. How many women in your life do you know what they like, what ticks them, meaning give them joy, makes them happy? Who do they want it to be when they were little girls? Who did they want to be when they grew up? How many of you know that? Or better yet, what color do they like? If you sit and think about the women in your life, do you know that about them? Or do you know about what they do? I asked myself this question, all the powerful, courageous, and resilient women that I have known all my life. I've known what they did. I never knew who they were, never knew what color they liked, never knew if they wanted to be ballerinas, never knew if they wanted to do cheerleading, never knew if they wanted to be bikers, never knew if they wanted to do race car driving. I didn't know anything about that about them. I didn't even know the color that they love. So if someone had to come to me today and say, Isabel, you talk about all these courageous, powerful, resilient women that you grew up with, that you watched growing up. Yeah. If I had to ask you, what did those women like? What were their favorite colors? What were their desires? What ticked them? And guys, for the life of me, I couldn't answer you that question because I don't know. What I could answer is if you asked me, what did they do? What did they do? I can write a book and tell you all day what they did, everybody else. But when it comes to them, I knew what they did. I didn't know who they were. And that's part of their identity. That's part of their inherited identity. A lot of us are living a life that we've been conditioned to think is our life, how our life needs to be, that blueprint. We're just following it according to how we have been raised to think this is how life will be. And then you wonder sometimes to get in relationships. And then you wonder sometimes you're starting work, you're starting to do things, you're starting a business and you're moving through life. Then you keep feeling like things are not moving. And we want to point the fingers on everybody else. Sometimes we have to look in ourselves, look into yourself. What is it about me that I'm feeling this way? What is it about me that I'm not feeling worthy? What is it? Where is this coming from? And I tell you what, for a lot of us, it is coming from our inherited identity because there are patterns, characteristics that we learn, that we were taught, things that we did that no longer serve us, that no longer serve us. So healing is not about becoming somebody new. It's removing everything that was never for you to begin with, right? These are just some of my notes that I'm reading to you guys that I wrote. The journey is not about finding yourself. It's about remembering, returning to you, to that little girl, to that little boy. What did you think? What did you feel, you know, those years? And honestly, doing that is going to require grieving the identities that you have grown. Some of us don't want to be honest with ourselves that we have outgrown some identities. And it's going to require you to do that. It's going to require you to grieve those identities. It's going to require you to look in the mirror and say, hey, I have done this for 40 years, 39 years, 50 years, 60 years. This is who I am. This is who the family has seen me to be. But here is the truth. I was performing. I was being my best self. But the true person of who I am, this is who I am. This is what I'm starting to discover. And some of the things that the family, the culture, the environments and communities taught me. They taught with love, they taught for survival, they taught for protection. Those things no longer serve me. In fact, they're wearing me down. That's what we call self-awareness. That's what we call healing. And then from that space, you start to say, oh, okay, I can no longer do this. This does not work. Yeah. So even if I go around my family, even if I go around my friends, even if I go around all these different environments, what we used to do, that doesn't work for me anymore. So I can no longer do this. And you be okay with it. And I'm just going to warn you right now, the moment you stop doing some of those things, we're going to look at you sideways because they're not used to it. How dare you change the very thing we all have been doing for years? How dare you change the very thing we've all been wanting to change for years? How dare you have the courage to say, this is an inherited identity and I want to write my own story. I want to add on to the amazing identity that my family, my culture, my environment, and my community gave me. I want to be able to add on to that and write my story. Right? right? Most of our suffering, yeah, comes from this is one of the reasons of our suffering. Most of our suffering comes from being in stasis within yourself and parts of yourself. No, there is more to you than what you're trained. There is more to you than how you are showing up. But you're busy stuck in this blueprint that you're trying to maneuver that doesn't really serve your life the way you want it to serve, right? And you're just maneuvering it. You're stuck in this blueprint. No, when your soul keeps telling you, move, do this, try that, do this different. Yeah. It is not an easy thing to do. Anytime you want to make a change, you will get people who will come against you. And that's A-okay. That is A-okay. It is important if you want to discover your purpose, live in your purpose, find wholeness and fulfillment. And I'm not talking about money here. I'm just talking about life in general. I'm talking about being a human being, not a human doer. I'm talking about truly being that version of yourself. In order for you to really find that person, there's some things about yourself you're going to have to unpack. There's some parts of yourself that you're going to have to let go because those parts are not serving you anymore. There's some parts of yourself that is not the ideal thing for you. It is not serving you anymore. Do you get my drift? Do you understand where I'm going? So take the time to really sit back and ask yourself powerful questions. In fact, what I'm going to do, I do have some powerful questions that I will share with you. These were some of the questions that I used for myself. So I figure, why not, right? This is a podcast. It's about healing, authenticity. Let's talk about it. Hopefully, this will help you. So here are a few questions that you can utilize. Take them if you want to. I'm just sharing them with you. You can use them if you want to. If you don't want to use them, please let them go. Who would I be without my titles? Who would I be without my titles? What beliefs have I inherited that no longer serve me? Who would I be without my titles? What beliefs have I inherited that no longer serve me? What have I mistaken for my identity that is actually a survival strategy? What have I mistaken for my identity that it is actually a survival strategy? What parts of me have I abandoned to belong? What parts of me have I abandoned to belong? Who is God inviting me to become? Who is God inviting me to become? Who is that person that God is inviting you to become? The one that's going to let go of some of the habits, the patterns, yeah, the culture. Your culture said you should have and own. So perhaps the reason you feel misaligned isn't because you've lost yourself. Perhaps you simply outgrown the identity that once protected you. And maybe this is the season. Maybe this season isn't about asking you to become more, asking you to do more, asking you to show up more, asking you to neglect yourself and give up yourself for everybody else. Maybe this is a season that is asking you to be still enough with yourself. Come home to yourself, meaning sit down with yourself and start asking yourself this top question. Look at your life in totality. Where am I going? What direction is it taking me? Because here is the thing. If we don't start looking at these things, it doesn't matter how much money we make, we will have the best things, we will acquire the best material things. So the $1,000,000 question is, who is this person being that is acquiring these things, all these $1,000,000 things, all these material things? Who is this person? Am I going that direction? What part of me do I need to adjust? What part of me do I need to let go? What part of me do I need to change? Okay. So this is part of that inherited identity. I'm just starting to talk about this. We're going to dive a little bit deeper as time goes, because I do believe that a lot of our grief, our anxiety, the uncertainty, the depression, Yeah. It has a lot to do with individual. We're all experiencing our own things, but collectively, the world is experiencing a lot of things. So what is happening is it is that inner conflict within ourselves. But once you get that identity together, once you get grounded within yourself, once you start understanding who you are, why you are, whose you are, yeah, you will be grounded within yourself, and you will start letting go of the things that you've used for survival. Because survival does not help when it comes to becoming your best self, right? We utilize it for the time. Then it will allow you to truly look at yourself authentically and say, no, this doesn't work. Grew up doing that, it doesn't work anymore. Grew up doing that, it doesn't work anymore. This is for you. And this is not only people are thinking this is 20s, 30s. No, these are people 40s, 50s, 60s. What a lot of us fail to realize is if we don't heal the inner child, if we don't take time to look within ourselves, you can be in your 60s and you're still showing up like the little boy and the little girl. The only difference is mentally you have acquired, right, information intellectually, so you're able to maneuver, you're able to talk not logistically, like you're able to have conversations, so mentally, how to do that. Yeah. You're a logical person. I say I'm a heart-centered person. You have these people, I'm all logic. Yes, you're all logic because you have used your brain, which is an amazing thing to move through life, figure out life, and make the best out of your life. But here is the truth. That person within you, if they're not healed, if you don't identify what works for you and what doesn't work for you, it will never be the same. You won't find the wholeness, you won't find the fulfillment, you won't find it within yourself. So that's it for me today. This is about the inherited identity. I hope this helps you start looking and saying, okay, let me try to discover what is going on with me here. What is my identity? What am I doing? Where am I at? And please remember, your identity is not bad. It is not a bad thing at all. But just like anything in life, right? We have to evolve. The things that we cannot carry until we come to the end of time, we can't carry those things. Yeah. So we need to let those go so that we can just fly, feel free, and continue to flourish, continue to get in fulfillment, continue to discover ourselves, and continue to heal. One truth that I want to tell you is always love and respect your family, but you also have to understand that you are one individual that God brought into this earth. Your life is here for a purpose. There's a purpose for your life individually. Yeah. So all those things that you think you have to be in order to be your best self, the habits or the identity that you caught from your family, not that you caught, that you were given from your family, that you were taught, one that you didn't choose. You don't have to be that. You can adjust that, just like anything else gets adjusted in order for it to grow, in order for it to thrive. You can't keep operating with the same mind frame, same principality, same blueprint. The only thing that does not change in life is God's law, the universe law, how things work, how nature works, right? And that's why they always say, I love Miles Monroe. He always says that I teach principles and laws that they always say the same and nothing changes. So do that for yourself. Again, thank you so much for being with me here today. I really appreciate you and I love you being here. Thank you for listening to Loud Whisper podcast. So grateful for you. From my heart to yours, please don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. Take good care of yourself. Take good care of yourself. Until next time, remember you are worthy. You matter. Your life matters. Take care.